So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. In today's video, I'm going to be showing how to build out a survival trotline. So this is used for emergency fishing. So quite often people have paracord and they have fishing hooks as part of their survival kit and their bug out bag and that kind of thing. I'm going to show you how to kind of combine these two to make a far more effective survival fishing piece of equipment, yeah? So if you're interested in that type of content, stay tuned. So the first order of business, I'm just going to walk through kind of the key items that are being used here. So I've got some 550 paracord. I've just got a large spool of it. If you've watched previous videos of mine, you've seen me kind of pulling off this over time. I only just recently got it, so I still got lots left. But it's just basic 550 cord, 7 strands on the interior, that type of thing. I've got some size 4 fishing hooks. I just got a little 10-pack of those. And these are optional. I'll show you ways to make this without them, but in my perspective, they're a little more ideal to use these little swivels. So I've got 350-pound swivels that are made out of stainless steel, and they'll be used in the project as well. All together, the fishing hooks and that were only a couple bucks each. The swivels are only a couple bucks, and the paracord, if you've got it, right? Most of the time, though, people tend to have this type of survival kit in their bug out bags and those types of things for emergency situations. But like I say, let's walk through kind of assembling these in a fashion where they can be far more effective for fishing. Okay, so the very first order of business I'm going to do here is just cut off a 2-foot length of this 550 paracord. So I've got a measuring tape laid out here, and I've already got it set out to 2 foot. So I'm just going to measure that. Seems to be about right there. And then I'm just going to take my knife now and cut that. So simple. Now the main line, I'm just going to set this little 2-foot length to the side now, and this main line, I'm just going to grab my lighter and I'm going to melt the end here because I don't want any frayed ends on the end, yeah? So give me 2 seconds and I'll switch camera angles and stuff. Okay, so now on the main end that's connected to the spool, if you will, I'm just going to, like I say, melt the end of that. And I want that to, and this is really just to stop any fraying, but I don't want this to bulge out at all. I want this to kind of be fairly narrow. So I'm just going to kind of, now I know people that are in the paracord community are going to recommend against, doing things without burning your little fingers and those types of things, but I'm used to campfires and other incidents that go on. So I consider myself fairly immune. But needless to say, all I did was just melt the end. Now I'm going to take these swivels. Like I say, I've got, I think there's 10 in the pack here. And I'm going to need 7 of those for this project. So I've got 5 that are there. And I'll just pull 2 more off the line here. And like I say, these are size number 1s. I find they work well for the size of the paracord. And the thinking really is, I've got my 7 now. I'll just set those aside. Now, on this main line that I have still connected to the spool, I'm going to turn around and, let's just make sure I'm in camera here. I'm just going to turn around and hook on each one of these 7 swivels and just put them right onto the line. So like I say, just as such, nothing complex here. So I'll go and put the other 7 on and then I'll move on to the next step, yeah? Okay, so another minute or so has passed, and as you can see, I've hooked on the 7 swivels so that they're sitting on the main line. So really elementary. And like I said, these are size number 1 swivels, and that way they have large eyes so you can go onto the paracord without causing any real issues, yeah? But I'm just going to slide those now. There's the end that I heated up and melted, if you will. I'm just going to slide these along a bit just so I have a bit of room to work with. Okay, so now for the next step, I'm going to take the end that I melted there, and I'm just going to turn that into an eye loop that I can use later on to hook onto trees and stones and other things. So needless to say, I've shown that not lots in previous videos, but really elementary. And I just give it a good pull in all directions to make sure it's on there good and tight. And you could use like a bowline here. This is the knot I learned when I was young, and I've been using it for years, and it's just the nature of me working with rope. But either way, so really simple so far. We've just got that eye on the line, then we've got these 7 swivels. And the thinking really now is a couple feet up from this eye. I'm just gonna, here, I'll move this out of the way a bit. A couple feet up from this eye, I just want to put my first knot. So all I'm gonna do is an overhand knot. I'm just gonna take it, wrap it around, feed it through, and kind of set that now as a knot in the line. You know, nothing complex here, really elementary. So like I say, nothing to it. And I'm gonna turn around and take one of these swivels now, and I want to slide that up near that knot and kind of keep that at that location. And the other 6 that are on the line, I'm just going to move those further down and out of the way. So they're gone now. And now I'm going to turn around, and on this side now of the swivel, I'm just going to put another overhand knot. So really elementary, nothing to it. So it's on that side. Hopefully the camera's picking that up well. And I want to give that like an inch or 2 room to kind of move around. And that way the swivel's got a bit of play. But in essence, all I've done is just now put 2 knots, one on each side. Let me make sure I'm getting that on the camera good. So I've just put 2 knots, one on each side of this swivel to kind of lock the swivel so it can only go so far, yeah? Now the thinking really is going to be every 3 foot down, further down this line, I'm going to want to repeat this pattern, and I'm going to do that for every single one of the swivels. So I'll go off and kind of tie these knots off, but you've seen the basics of it now. I'm going to go off and tie these off, and like I say, they'll be at a 3 foot distance from this knot out to the next. I'll have the swivels, then 3 foot out to the next, and so on, yeah? And I'll do that until I no longer have any more swivels on the line. Or, well, they'll all be strapped to the line, but that I have to deal with, yeah? So let me go off and do that, and then I'll cut back. Okay, so just to make sure that I don't miss any parts in the video, because, you know, I want to make it a good tutorial, that kind of thing. So needless to say, that's where the swivel is with the 2 knots on the line. So now I'm just going to take this, run it out 3 foot. I've got my tape measure out here. I'm just going to run it out 3 foot. You know, this doesn't have to be exact science. You can be an inch or 2 off here and there, and that's okay. You know, but needless to say, I'm just going to slide the rest of the swivels that are on the line further up, so I've got room to work with. And right at that 3 foot point, I'm just going to turn around and pull the line through and do another simple overhand knot here and bring it right up to where I had it pinched. And then that lets me know, yeah, I'm at the 3 foot mark, if you will. And that's, like I said, just the mark that exists between the one, it'll be a drop line that comes off here, they call it, but from this knot to the first set we did, it'll be 3 foot there. So I'm just going to slide another swivel down and near that now, that new knot we just tied. And on the other side of that, I'm just going to tie off a small knot here as well, and I'm going to repeat that process. Like I say, I just didn't want to make sure I didn't miss any of the steps, right? So either way, it's 3 foot between what they call the drop lines, which is where these swivels are going to connect onto as we move forward, but 3 foot between them, and then we're going to have 1 foot drops that come off of the lines themselves, yeah? So I'll just, like I say, push on and just kind of do this. It's a 5-minute job, so let me just get this done, and then I'll cut back to you, yep? Okay, so now I'm just down to the last one now. Like I say, I'm still connected to this main spool. I've just been kind of running along that line as I go, yeah? But all I'm going to do is put in this last knot here. So I want to kind of make sure this goes through. That's the easiest way to describe it, if you will. And then I just pull the rest of the line through that I've made earlier. And like I said, off camera, that took about 5 minutes. So this isn't really a huge job, right? Like, this is relatively elementary to do. But needless to say, I just pull it all through. I know where my point is. So either way, I want to have it where there's only about an inch, maybe 1.5 inches, you know, room for that swivel to potentially move on. So hopefully you can see there. You know, and none of this is really exact measurement stuff, you know? It's really ballparking. The reason why we went with the 3 foot in between was because when we put the drop lines onto this main line of paracord, they're only going to be a foot in length. So it's one of those things where we don't want to have it that they're tangling up in each other when they're sitting out in the water. But all I'm going to do now for the next step is, this is the 7th one. I'm going to turn around and give myself a bit of spare paracord, you know, a couple feet if you will. And none of that's exact measurement stuff. It's just kind of do it by feel. Give yourself a few feet, you know. Keep it simple. I'm going to turn around and cut that off now. And should always put that away, really. Safety last. It's my motto. That's how I end up with bloody fingers in half my videos. But I'm just going to turn around and melt the ends, and that way that they're not fraying at all, that kind of thing, right? And I know there's tools that paracord guys use for this kind of stuff, but you know, I'm a savage animal. I don't know what to say. So needless to say, that's just to stop the fraying from happening. So see if I can set that without it melting into my floor. But now when it comes to the end of the main line that we made of this trot line, I'm just going to do the same kind of knot on this side. That's probably just going to confuse the camera, but let me see if I'm in a good shot here, where all I do is put a bite in the line, and then I take it and I wrap it around my finger, kind of create a little hole. Hopefully the camera is seeing that all right. And then I just feed this end through. You know, it's got to be one of the simplest knots you can tie, really. And that just allows for me to have a loop, or an eye, as I like to call it, on the end of my line, just like I did on the other side. And really, now if I just want to lark's head this onto a tree or something, to give you an example, you know, I can hook and strap onto that really easily with having the loop in the line. And that's really, or I can connect it to other lines and that kind of stuff. It gives me future flexibility in that regard, just leaving that loop kind of set into the line to begin with, right? So either way, we've got the main body of the trot line done now. And then we'll move on to the next step. Yep. So I know this isn't the most elegant camera angle, but you know, hopefully it gives you the scope of what's going on here. So needless to say, we've got the loop that starts on this end. It comes around a couple foot length, and then we feed into the swivels with the knots on both sides, so the swivel can kind of set a bit left and right. And then it just fishes around, and then I just showed all of them kind of that are sitting on the line. And it's just one contiguous line that goes, you know, S's back and forth. I just packed it in this way to kind of show you guys. And then on the end, it's just got another loop, right? So fairly elementary, there's not much to it. And like I say, I'll give a close up one more time for the swivels and the knots and stuff, so people can kind of get a good idea of what is going on there. But I think it's fairly self-explanatory. So now the thinking really is, on each one of these swivels that we have sitting on the line, we're going to end up putting the fishing lines themselves off of this now. Okay, so I'll do that as the next step. Okay, so now for the next step of the project, I'm going to take that 2 foot length of paracord that we cut in the beginning of the video, and I'm just going to pull out all 7 strands of the inner lines that exist inside the paracord. Now this is fairly standard with most 550 cord, that you're going to have 7 inner strands, that kind of thing. So, and then I've just got this outer sheath. I can use this later for a different project, so I'll just set this aside. But really the main focus is going to be on these lines now. Now normally this 550 paracord is called 550 because it can handle up to 550 pounds. So it's a good strong cable. We use it when we're doing bushcraft and survival stuff and backcountry stuff all the time. Typically you'll see either this used or tarred bank line, which I have some set to the side as well. And the tarred bank line tends to be for more disposable things, if you will, whereas paracord's a little more expensive, and because it's got the inner strands and stuff, we tend to use this for projects that are going to last longer. But each individual strand that sits in here, I'll just kind of pull one of these up now, is going to be the equivalent of like a fishing line. So it's got about a 40-pound test on it to give you an idea how strong the line is here. So this is a good, strong fishing line in that regard. And what we're going to do, there's kind of a few ways to go about doing this. And I'm going to do it where I'll tie proper knots onto the hooks and everything, but there's kind of quick lash ways you can use where you use loops and those types of things to kind of quick attach and detach this out in the field. But given the size of the fishing hooks that I'm using slightly smaller. Like quite often trot lines and those types of things are used fishing for large things like catfish and those types of stuff. Whereas the region I'm in doesn't have those types of fish here. We've got a lot of trout and salmon and those types of things. So I decided to go with a gauge of hook that was more adequately suited towards the widest range of fish that I could catch in my region. You know, so it's good to know what the fish are available. If all you've got is little tiny fish in your area, you're going to have to go with smaller hooks. You know, if you've got larger fish in the area that are kind of your main ones that you're able to catch, then you're going to want to go with larger hooks. And the reason why that's important now is because the hooks have eyes on them. And I'll just pull one of these out and show you. And now if I was using a large hook, hopefully I'll be able to catch this on camera. If I was using a large hook, the eye right there, the eye on that would be substantially larger, and it would allow me to kind of just bend this line and feed it through the eye, if you will. But because this is a smaller hook and I'm aiming this trot line to be more of a survival emergency for catching smaller fish, I don't have the luxury of just making a loop and quick lashing that. So what I'm going to do is walk through the process of tying this on to your trot lines and getting it ready for having multiple lines in the water at the same time, yeah? Okay, so now for the first order of business, let's take the hook now. And all we're going to do is feed this inner strand through the eye of the fishing hook. I'm going to kind of, so it's brought through now. I'm just going to kind of hold it at the eye. And I've done lots of fishing in the past, so I'm not overly worried about doing this. But the thinking really is, I'm going to turn around and wrap this 6 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can go 7 or 8, but you know, there's no harm in it, but 6 the minimal. So, and then you're gonna turn around and take the tag and feed it back through the hole that's up by the eye of the hook. And you're just gonna wanna feed that in there. And set that knot. And kind of, you should be able to brace it right up to the eye of the hook. And that'll give you a good tight fishing knot that sits clean in line with the eye. Now I'm just going to go snub off the little bit of scrap I have and melt that down so it's nice and smooth and close to the body. So I'll cut right back. But hopefully here, I'll see if I can get that close. Your knot should look something along that lines, yeah? Really elementary. Okay, so I just kind of clean that up a bit, give you an idea of, it makes a nice clean connection, yeah? Now, on the other end of this 2-foot strand, we're going to tie the same knot like we did right at the beginning of the video, where I'm going to put a bite in the line. In fact, here, I'll just move these out of the way because I know that could be a visual distraction. So we're just going to put a bite in the line. I'm going to form the loop here, and I'm going to feed the bite that I made. I'm just going to feed that through the loop and pull it through. And now we're on for that, and it's not going anywhere. And I'm just going to snip off with my pocket knife. I'm going to snip this off and melt it so that it's nice and flush up so it's good and clean, yeah? So I'll just go off camera, do that, and come back. Okay, so like I said, I just went and kind of cleaned up that loop so it had a nice end on it and just melted it and stuff. So now I'm going to turn around and take the first swivel that's on the line, and I'm going to take the loop that I have on the end of this. I'm going to feed it through that swivel, of course, every time I'm on camera. I'm going to feed it through that swivel, and then I'm going to just kind of hold it open. And I'm going to do a lark's head knot here, really, of where I take the hook now and I feed the hook back through. Sorry, I know I'm making poor camera work here. Take the hook, put it back through, and just loop it onto that line so that it's connected onto the swivel. And it's really just that simple. I'm braced onto this swivel now. So when I want to use this kit and turn around and have it out in the water, I can quickly pop these on just by doing that loop like I just showed you right here. I want to simply just kind of hook those on, and when I'm done fishing and I want to kind of pack my kit away and make sure that I don't have any sharp hooks or anything, I can just pop it off right at this point, yeah? And you can see, it's really elementary. I mean, there's nothing to these things. I've shown these lark's head knots lots in previous videos, right? This is all familiar terrain to most people. But yeah, really elementary. So now I've got the fishing hook strapped on. Now I could potentially put on some flies and different kind of artificial baits and those types of things onto these, and I'll show an example of that. But I wanted to kind of stop here for 2 seconds. Let me shift camera angles and show you, if you're not using these swivels, and the swivels aren't part of the equation, you can do the exact same thing. You can set up the knots and all that kind of stuff, and with that little lark's head knot that we just did there, right here, how we hooked onto the swivel, you could easily do the exact same thing just on the space that sat in between the two knots, and you get the same effect. So, push comes to shove, you only really need to have the paracord and the hooks. The swivels are purely optional. They're just better for longevity's sake. When the cordage wants to kind of twist up on itself and that type of thing, it just helps stop that. But it's definitely not a showstopper, if you will, for functionally being able to build this if you were in a survival emergency situation. The only thing you're really going to need is about 25 foot of paracord and, a pack of hooks that are sitting in your bag. But I'll go off and make the other 7 more that exist of these. And the reason why I went with 7 on the line was because that was how many strands of the inner cordage of the paracord that I had. So rather than waste anything, I just thought I'd make a smaller trot line that was, what would that be, 25 foot roughly, give or take in length, and use up just the 7 that I have here, yeah? So either way, I'll go off and do these other 7 off, and then I'll shift camera angles and potentially just bring this out to outside and show you what it looks like when it's kind of fully assembled, yeah? Okay, so as you can see, I just went and did 6 of them now, where just got the hooks, like I say, attached, and the loops that are set under the line. And this is really showing more for survival situation where you might not have some fishing line with you, but you got some paracord and you got some hooks, right? But when it comes to these types of setups where you've got a hook, a foot of line, and a loop on the end, they're readily available in any fishing store. You don't have to make these out. If you want to kind of pre-build this out, you can go and buy store-bought stuff that's already made like this and just assemble all of this in a matter of like 5 minutes. I'm just walking through this full exercise to show you how you could purely do it with paracord and fishing hooks if need be. And like I say, those swivels that I put on there are optional. That was just for my specific build. I wanted to have them in there. But if this was purely a survival situation, having 25 foot of paracord and 7 or 8, fishing hooks, 10 fishing hooks, I could easily set up a trot line that is highly effective at catching fish. So needless to say, I'm going to go and put on all 6 of these and just hook them on to each one of the swivels, that with the 7 swivels there. I'm going to turn around and hook them one onto each one of these, and that'll be the complete trot line then. And then when it comes to putting this out in the field and stuff, it's easy enough to sink this whole setup underwater with 2 sticks, 1 on each end, and just make it all covert, where this was below the water line, so that you were able to catch fish covertly and like I say, in a survival manner, if you will. In a lot of areas, these types of things aren't legal. To turn around and put this many hooks in the water and that kind of stuff, it's just not considered a fair chance for the fish, if you will. But in an emergency survival situation, the context changes, you know, where these types of things could easily help save your life if you were in an environment where you were in danger for a sustained period of time and you needed to eat and all that kind of stuff. But either way, I'll go and hook these lines on, and it looks like the sun's starting to go outside. I've been dragging my heels on putting this video together, but the thinking will be I'll probably end up doing this tomorrow in the morning on my end, but it'll be the next scene for you guys, where I'll go and just show this when I get up in the morning. I'll go and show this in my backyard, and you guys can kind of see the context of it in its full form, if you will. Yeah, so like I say, I'll go off and hook these hooks on and get it ready for the next scenes. All right, well, good morning, fellow YouTubers. So I'm out in my backyard now, and what I've done now is I've just strung up the trot line from here down to over in this area over here, and I've got each one of the drop lines kind of hanging along this line. So I'll do a close-up of that, but I just wanted to kind of show you the size of, if you will, of this. Is about 25 feet to give you an idea of the rough size. I mean, you can adjust the sizings of these to be hundreds of feet, or you can bring them down to a couple feet and shorten the drop lengths and all that kind of thing, right? Now, if it's all adjustable, you just got to work some basic math to make sure the hooks don't catch to each other. But I'll shift angles here and do a close-up now of one of the individual kind of drop lines and show you that in detail. And then I'll show you the comparison between the drop lines to show you how the hooks kind of stay away from interconnecting to each other. And it's really as simple as those loops that we created on both ends. Those can easily just be hooked onto like a tree branch on the shore, or you know, you can hook the other end onto a stone and toss it out in the water, that kind of thing, right? It's very flexible. Or you could have that end floating with a piece of wood out in the lake or whatever, right? They're very flexible in that regard. But either way, I'll give you a close-up and show you the details of things now. Yeah, all right, well, try to get a close-up of this the best I can, but as you can see, there's the swivel that we had connected with the two knots that sit, you know, on both sides to limit its movement, if you will. And then it just gets looped around the eye for the drop line, and then it simply just goes down and connects on to the hooks, right? Now, you could easily turn around and swap these out. Instead of being hooks that are just baited, you could use flies or other things in that regard. And depending on how long this video is, I'll show you how you can make a paracord fly for when you're out in the field really easily, if you have no bait and the bait's really restrictive, and that way you can kind of, you know, do what you need to do to catch fish. But as you can see, there's the first one. So we've got the loop that comes off. There's the first one. There's the second, and it just carries on of, you know, and like I said, you can put these as far as you want in that regard of. And then on this end, like I say, I've just jimmy rigged it up so that the loop kind of hooks onto the fence, you know, keep it simple. But I'll stop here and shift camera angles and just show you now the distancing of why it was important to kind of do the 3-foot spacings, given that we had the 1-foot drop lines coming off. So 2 seconds. So like I say, I'm never 100% sure how well the camera's going to pick these things up, but such is life. So I've got the hook on the one drop line sitting over here, and then I'll grab the hook on this one. And if I bring those together, you can see they can't reach each other. Hopefully the camera's picking that up, but they can't reach each other. So the distancing between these is really relative to how long the drop lines are going to be that you want to have down into the water, just so that you can stop them from kind of hooking into each other and that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right, so yeah, I just thought this was quick enough, and I can add it into the video either way, right? So I've got one of my fishing hooks here that isn't attached to the drop lines or any of that business. So, you know, just a little fishing hook, and it's got some bait barbs on it. So there's little barbs, little hooks, if you will, little pointy bits that sit on the backside here, and they're designed to help kind of keep the bait on the hook. I don't know if the camera's picking that up because it's, you know, just the limitations of the camera, but there's little tiny barbs on there, and they're really they're just there to help keep the bait on, and they'll help hook the fly on. So I switched over to a different piece of paracord. If you watch previous videos of mine, you'll see I have tons of these loops that I use sitting, you know, this was a loop at one point, but I have tons of loops that sit in my backpack that are this kind of orange color, and I tend to use the orange for when I'm doing videos and stuff because it stands out better on the camera. But with this Trotline, I went with the dark color because to me it was more ideal for in the water. I don't want to distract anything, you know, I don't want to distract the fish from you know, the prime focus of biting onto the hook, if you will, right? But these are really simple. So all it is really this paracord. I've pulled out the inner strands a little bit, and in this situation they have a little bit of a natural hook to them because I was using this as a loop. But either way, what I'm going to do is take the hook now, and I'm just going to push it up inside the sheath of the paracord and kind of set that in nice and deep. Now I can feel where the eye of the hook is. It's right up here. So what I'm going to do now, and make sure that I'm really, you know, I got a good body on that hook now. And what I'm going to do is just pull over board as a cutting board, if you will. And I'll just set this down for 2 seconds and pop out my pocket knife and just going to cut off all the excess now of this hook that's up by the eye. So make sure that I'm not cutting into the steel. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now I've got the main body of the fly, if you will, and the hook eye is right in here. Hopefully you can see that. Now the thinking really though is all I'm going to want to do now is take a lighter, kind of melt that back so that that hook eye is open and clean, and the paracord really starts to kind of contract down and bite onto the hook itself, just to stop it from going anywhere, yeah? And hopefully you can still see that on camera, where the eye is still free and that kind of thing. But now that fly is kind of glued on, if you will, by the melting of the plastic. It's kind of glued on now to the fishing hook. So really simple, right? And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab a pin here, 2 seconds. I've got a pin in the garage. Hold on 2 seconds. Let me just grab that. Now you could use your knife or anything, you know, a little pick on your knife or any of that business to do this part. You know, it's relatively straightforward. But, you know, I've got a little pin here that I'm going to use. And all I'm going to do now is kind of, on those white strands, I'm going to kind of loosen up the paracord so that it becomes wispy. And you can kind of do this with your hand even, to a certain degree. You know, obviously make sure you don't get your fingers caught. Make sure I'm in camera half decent here. And really all I'm doing is just kind of separating the threads of the inner strands of that 550 cord and wanting to fray it out so it's fuzzy. And this might take you a minute or two to kind of do, because it is a bit tedious, especially when you got old eyes like mine. But that's the thinking really of you can even roll it in your fingers. You see how it kind of puffs up and causes it to become not so much like a strand of cordage, but just like fluff. So that's really the thinking you're going to want to do. And now the same exists with the orange part. I'm going to want to kind of come along and just kind of loosen that up, you know, a good 1/4 inch or so, and fray that up So it just becomes poofy. That's my scientific term for it. And as you can see, it starts to become more and more like a normal fly that you would, you know, see at a fishing shop or any of that business. So you can easily turn around and attach this on where I've hooked on the hooks. You can easily attach that on to your trot line if you want. And then additionally, if you have some other bits of kit in your bag, these can be handy too, where I'll just set that down for a second. They've got a couple beads, you know, really simple. They've got fairly large eyes and the, you know, the holes in them, if you will. But on your trot line, you could easily slip that on to your trot line so that the bead just kind of sits as a lead ahead of the hook, if you will. And this very much looks like a commercial jig, if you will, that you would buy in the store. So if you don't have any bait, or the bait's hard to come by in the location you're in, potentially you could use just a bit of paracord to achieve your results. You know, and one of the other things, and I don't really mention this too much in my videos, but one of the other things I find is invaluable to have if you want to kind of seal thin threads of line and that type of stuff is nail polish. It's waterproof. It gives you nice bright colors. You can get every color under the rainbow and that kind of stuff, right? And it's easy enough if you want to turn around and add a bit of additional color. If you know the color that's kind of the fish's fancy in your area, it's easy enough to turn around and, you know, apply a bit of additional color if you want to your fly. You know, in this situation, kind of giving it a bit of a red head, you know. But if I was using the inner strands of the paracord in this situation, instead of melting it up near the eye of the hook, if I was using a bit of the inner strands to kind of thread this down and make more of a head of the fly and that kind of stuff, you could easily use a bit of nail polish to seal those threads so that they don't come loose when the fish are biting on them and that type of stuff, right? So, and then I'm just going to turn around and, like I say, just kind of twist and rub them in my fingers a little bit to give it a bit more body to that. And as you can see, it makes a fantastic fly. And you can go with any color under the rainbow depending on the paracord you have and that kind of stuff, right? And the eye itself was never interfered with. You know, it's still there and still easily able to hook on just as you normally would. But there you are. I just wanted to show you that using paracord and fishing hooks, you know, without any real gear, if you're out in the wilderness and you're in a survival situation, yeah, you could do the add-ons with the nail polish and the beads and that type of stuff if you have them in your kit. Now, quite often a lot of people don't, but, you know, but one of those situations, if you have a bit of paracord, you have a dozen hooks in your bag, you could turn around and form a trot line, you can create flies, and you can set that out into a water location to hopefully help you catch fish as you move through time. Then when it comes to those trot lines, like I say, there's a plethora of ways you can kind of set them into the water. You can have one end braced to the shore where you've hooked onto a tree or a stump or something that's right near the shore edge, and you literally can tie a stone to the other end and just toss it out into the water and have it where your line is anchored at shore. Or you can turn around, if you have the capacity to get out over the water, you could easily put 2 pieces of wood to float both ends of the trot line so that they stay above water, and just have all your drop lines and that kind of stuff sitting, you know, down below in the water line, if you will, more in lakes and that kind of stuff. You know, and if you're using them in rivers where the river isn't quite as wide as the trot line itself, it's easy enough to put it in on, say, you know, like a 45-degree angle or that kind of thing, where you attach one end close to shore, you do it near the bend of the river or creek that you're on, and you kind of walk down and set your other end of the trot line down around the bend, and it allows you to get that trot line out and into the water, you know, and covering a good portion of the creek or river that you're wanting to fish in without necessarily having to go out and get wet or any of that business, right? And these are kind of set it and forget it type things of, you turn around, you drop your trot lines into the water, you come back on a daily or, you know, multi in an hour, if you will. It depends on how eager you are to kind of check your lines. But if you've got a fish on the line and it's got the hook down into its belly, it's not going anywhere, right? Now, if you can just come back, 5, 6 hours later and pull your lines and see if you got anything. It's really more of a passive way. When it comes to any type of survival situation, a lot of guys will go off about, hunting and everything else. That takes a huge amount of calories to go tromping through the forest with a gun and everything else, looking to catch a deer, that you might come across one every couple days if you're in a more sparse region. When it comes to this type of passive technology, I recommend using this kind of stuff in a survival situation over active hunting. Now, I would recommend using this type of technology or nets, or when it comes to catching game, using traps rather than active hunting. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you've done everything under the sun, you can afford to go off active hunting if you've got a full belly. But in most emergency survival situations, you're going to be worried about the calories in and the calories out every single day until you either get out of that situation or you're found, or, however that ends for you. But one way or the other, you're going to be highly concerned about calories in and out. And any type of way that you can passively set things up to hunt and to catch fish and to those types of things is to your benefit, because you can focus your calorie use on gathering wood or gathering water or gathering other resources that are going to be critical for your survival moving forward. Now, I know that in a lot of places there's laws about using trot lines and there's limitations, or they're banned altogether. So these aren't something that I would recommend just using willy-nilly. These are purely for, in my perspective, unless you're in an area that's legally acceptable, these are purely for emergency survival situations. You need to catch a couple fish so you don't starve to death, that kind of thing, right? But either way, I've got the sniffles because I got a bit of cold coming on, so I'm not going to carry on ranting and raving. But one way or the other, hopefully you got something out of this video. And like I said, when it comes to a bit of paracord and some fishing hooks, it could definitely change your survival situation. So if you enjoy this type of content, stay tuned. There's more coming in the future. I know I've been a little bit delayed on putting out videos. I've had some off-camera projects that I've been working on, and I just didn't want to reveal that information to the public of, off-grid bug-out locations, those types of things. I don't really want to video record all of that kind of stuff. The country I live in is a little bit of a totalitarian state in that regard of they really crack down on people doing anything like that. So, I'm restrictive to wanting to show that information to the public. But one way or the other, if you enjoy this type of content, thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, all that happiness, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.